Over the years, there's been numerous reports of alien abductions. Often, these stories sound unbelievable, with bizarre events occurring and strange conversations with the beings. Perhaps one of the more stranger things that we've seen are some alien abductees reporting that DNA was extracted and some type of clone was produced. These allegations sound extremely far-fetched, but it's important to point out there are some cases of abductees reporting this. In this episode, we will examine one such case, the 1985 alien abduction of 23-year-old Xavier Clares. On July 21st, 1985, around 8 o'clock in the morning, Spaniard Xavier Clares grabbed several cameras and drove from Barcelona to snap photographs of Dolmen de la Pedra Gental of El Gorgina. El Dolmen is a 5,000-year-old megalithic structure around 50 kilometers outside Barcelona. Xavier spent about 2 hours sightseeing the area and photographing the megalith. It was a beautiful day with no clouds in the sky, and Xavier was able to get a number of photos of the structure. After this, he began driving back home, and he returned. He would be shocked to see that his odometer was much higher than expected. Instead of just adding 50 kilometers, the odometer was now 300 kilometers higher. It didn't make sense, and Xavier had checked it before he left for the trip. The car was also dirty. There was some sort of sticky substance all over the seats. There was mud all over the wheels, even though the area he was in was completely dry. During that time, there actually was a drought in the area. Things would get even more strange from here, though. When Xavier returned, all the stores were open in the area. This was odd because he left on a Sunday, and the majority of the stores were closed on Sunday in the city. As Xavier entered his home, his wife and brother let out a sigh of relief and began pressing him on where he had been. Xavier was confused as to what was going on. The two would go on to tell him he had been gone for almost 2 days. It was now Monday, around 6 p.m., and they had scoured the area looking for him. Things would get even more scary, though, for Xavier. Xavier began to look at his things for more details as to what happened. On one of his cameras, he noticed there had been some photos taken, although he never remembered taking them. Xavier decided to have the photos developed, and when he saw them, there would be several faces which he described as green and demonic. The situation had become much more frightening, and Xavier decided to consult a professional. He called Carol Ramis, a parapsychologist that he had known for years. Ramis would see the photos and realize the seriousness of the situation. After discussing it a bit more, Carol would discover that Xavier had been having strange encounters for years. He had been visited at night by the Greys. Xavier never seemed concerned, though, as he felt they were benevolent and never harmed him. Carol wanted to uncover the missing time and what happened, so she suggested Xavier go under hypnosis. Professor Francisco de Asís Rovati Heredia, a noted Spanish parapsychologist, was selected for the job. Heredia was very experienced in conducting these sessions, especially with alien abductees. During the sessions, Xavier would learn the following as to what happened. As Xavier was driving, he would spot a fog up ahead on the road. He remembered just how strange it was, since it was a clear and sunny day. He seemed to black out, and the next thing he recalled was waking up on the side of the road. A sticky substance began falling on his head, and he stood up to see a group of beings. They didn't resemble the ones that usually visit him in the nighttime, though. The beings insisted that he go with them, but Xavier didn't want to go. They insisted and said they want to see how he is. The next thing he remembered was going down to some type of slope or ramp. Xavier recalls heading down toward a cave, but he's unable to head back up. The beings appear to be enjoying themselves, and Xavier is disgusted by their appearance. They are all gray, really wrinkled, with some sort of liquidy substance oozing from their skin. In the cave, or wherever they are, the air stinks like rotten eggs, and Xavier recalled having trouble breathing. The beings then began communicating with him telepathically. They're speaking Spanish and telling Xavier they need to put a catheter-like device in his arm. He tries to fight back and resist, but the beings touch him and paralyze him. As they start to draw blood, Xavier asks where they are from. Telepathically, they tell Xavier they are from Cassiopeia. Xavier asks a few more questions, and then the beings state that they are going to clone Xavier. Xavier is terrified at this point and believes they will kill him once the replica is made. The next thing he remembers is waking up in his car. His replica is sitting right behind him in the back seat. The being looks just like Xavier, even wearing the same clothes. The only difference, though, is the alien has longer hair. The clone doesn't speak, but just creepily laughs at Xavier. The being would tell Xavier to drive and drop him off at the corners of Vallespir and Cons de Balac in Barcelona. While it doesn't appear that Xavier would see his replica after this, several friends and family would tell him they saw him in places Xavier never was. On one occasion, a friend of Xavier reported that he saw him walking on Mercado del Duero. Xavier, though, hadn't gone to that area in months. The person would go on to tell Xavier the person he saw was wearing the clothes Xavier was wearing on the day he was taken. Xavier would later discover months after the event he had 3 triangular-shaped punctures on his left arm. What can we make of this case? It surely seems like a work of science fiction. However, there are some characteristics that lend support to the story. 1. Xavier mentioned the being spoke in perfect Spanish and telepathically. This is a detail we have seen in other alien encounters and abductions. There's various languages, of course, but the theme is the language was spoken perfectly. One other interesting detail is the fog on the road. That is something we have seen in other alien abduction cases. In 2 prior episodes we have covered on this channel, the Amore Rivera alien abduction and the Bayamon alien abduction in Puerto Rico, a strange mist was reported both prior to those abductions. Missing time in the prior visitations provides some support as well, although missing time could be a number of things. While this case does have some credible things, the biggest glaring weakness is that almost all the details come when Xavier was under hypnosis. This is important as in it doesn't appear that Xavier has any conscious memory of the events. Most often we see individuals able to remember some of the events prior to hypnosis. Perhaps the strangest aspect of this case, though, has to do with the duplicates. This feels like something out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, yet throughout history, there has been multiple stories of people running into their doppelgangers. A well-known case, which was covered a long time ago on this channel, was the case of Percy Shelley, husband of Frankenstein author Mary Shelley. Percy was convinced he had seen his doppelganger, and months after this occurred, he would die at sea. Many believe that alien hybrids walk among us, and while there's no evidence of this, it's certainly a frightening thought. While the case of Xavier is definitely a controversial one, it's certainly interesting, and hopefully one we can learn from.